You know those horror movie villains that are just so twisted, so terrifying they get under your skin? Well, what if I told you that some of the absolute worst ones weren't just dreamed up by a writer? What if they all came from the true story of one single real-life person? Let's uncover the man behind the monsters. I mean, we're talking about characters that are so deeply disturbing you think they could only exist on a movie screen. But nope, their origins are terrifyingly real. It all starts with guys like, oh yeah, you know him, the twitchy, awkward motel owner from Psycho. His whole relationship with his mother, well, it took a very, very dark turn. And then you've got this guy, the silent, chainsaw-swinging nightmare from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, who, wears the skin of other people. And of course, how could we forget the killer from The Silence of the Lambs, the one hunting women to create something just unspeakable? So you have three different monsters, right? Three iconic films. But what if I told you that their DNA, the very blueprint for all that horror, can be traced back to a single real-life source? See, to understand the monsters, you have to understand the man. And his story doesn't start in Hollywood. It starts on an isolated farm in early 20th century America. This is him, Edward Theodore Gein. To the folks in his small town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, he was just Ed, a quiet, kind of odd, but basically harmless handyman. But what was going on behind the scenes in his childhood, well, that's where the seeds of the monster were planted. Ed's world was basically a pressure cooker of misery. On one side, you had his father, George, an abusive alcoholic. On the other, his mother, Augusta, a religious fanatic who was just completely and totally dominating. She controlled every single aspect of his life. And this right here, this is the cornerstone of the whole twisted story. Augusta hammered it into his head day in and day out that the world was evil and that all women, except for her, of course, were instruments of the devil. His mind was just poisoned against the entire outside world. And then his tiny, isolated world completely imploded. First, his father died. A few years later, his brother died under some pretty mysterious circumstances. And then, just 1 year after that, his mother, the suffocating, controlling center of his entire universe, was gone. And just like that, he was utterly alone. All alone on that remote farm, with nothing but his mother's twisted teachings echoing in his head. Well, that's when Ed Gein's mind really started to break. And his home? It became something out of a nightmare. Okay, so fast forward to November 1957. A local hardware store owner, a woman named Bernice Worden, just vanishes. And guess who is the last person to see her? Yep, Ed Gein. So when the police headed out to his farmhouse to ask him a few questions, they had no idea they were about to stumble into hell on earth. This is just some of what they found. The body of the missing woman was there, yes, but the house itself was decorated with human remains. They found bowls made from skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, masks, actual masks made from real human faces. And the thing to remember is these weren't movie props. This was his reality. So at that point, the question wasn't what he did anymore. That was horrifyingly clear. The real question, the one everyone was asking, was why? What could possibly drive a human being to do these things? Well, psychiatrists had a name for it. They diagnosed Gein with schizophrenia and psychosis. He had totally and completely lost his grip on what was real and was living in a fantasy world built out of his mother's toxic ideas and his own crushing loneliness. And the core of that fantasy is just chilling. Gein told the police he was digging up bodies from local cemeteries because he was trying to make a woman suit. He was so consumed by his obsession that his end game was to crawl inside the skin of women, to literally become his dead mother. Now, for all the grave robbing and desecration, it's important to know that the official investigation only confirmed he escalated to actual murder twice. He took the lives of Bernice Worden and another local woman, a tavern owner named Mary Hogan. So what happens to a guy like Ed Gein? And how on earth does the story of this deeply disturbed man from rural Wisconsin become the actual blueprint for modern horror? Well, Gein was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He never went to prison in the usual sense. Instead, he spent the rest of his days in a mental institution, and he died there in 1984. His personal story ended there, but his legacy, that was just getting started. And this is his real, terrifying legacy. The details of his life just tapped right into our deepest fears, of dark family secrets, of the madness that could be hiding right next door. That obsessive, twisted relationship with his mother, that became Norman Bates. The gruesome house of horrors and the skin masks, that's Leatherface. And that chilling, unbelievable goal of creating a woman suit, that was the direct inspiration for Buffalo Bill. Ed Gein's life didn't just inspire a movie. It gave us the terrifyingly real template for an entire genre. So, when you really boil it down, the story of Ed Gein isn't just about the monsters on the movie screen. It's a haunting reminder of the darkness that can grow behind a quiet, ordinary face. And it leaves you with one really unsettling question. How much horror is hiding in plain sight?